Today's episode, Josh and I are going to hit the panic button on the struggling Dallas Mavericks. We're going to discuss Cavaliers trade rumors for Andre Drummond, as well as a few Blake Griffin points. And is Lamelo Ball the best 19-year-old player we've ever seen? All that and more next. Today's episode of the Two Pointers podcast is sponsored by Crack Technician Services. This awesome up-and-coming tech repair company can be your go-to for any tech repair service. From screen repair to battery replacement to speakers and so much more, they can fix it all. It is run by my good friend, Mr. Jonathan Hardy. You can inquire about a service by sending a message on Instagram at cracked_technician_services or by way of email, crackedtechnicianservices@gmail.com. Again, that's cracked_technician services on Instagram and crackedtechnicianservices@gmail.com. Two Pointers podcast listeners get an exclusive discount code. You can use TPP at checkout for 10% off your first service. Now on to today's episode. Welcome back to the Two Pointers podcast, everyone. I'm Trevor.
And I'm Josh.
Welcome back to the newest episode. We are going to cover, like we mentioned at the top, we're going to start with the struggling Dallas Mavericks. We're officially hitting the panic button, and this is the moment where I insert the panic button sound. I don't know what I decided on yet, but post-editing me will find out. This is where we insert the panic button sound. As of recording this on now Tuesday, the 16th, they are 13-15. They're 10th in the West. Now, granted, that was as of Monday. We are recording now on Tuesday. But just a few things that I wanted to go over with the listeners and Josh as well. We mentioned it last week, but they are struggling hardcore. They are struggling bad. And a couple of things that I want to make note of, and then we can discuss them. I don't think it's necessarily a debate. I think it's just a matter of, where they are and what they need to do to improve, because they obviously, Luka was the MVP favorite going into the season. Actually, he was the favorite, as well as they were a title contending team. Offense isn't doing too bad for the most part. They are pretty low in assists per game with 23. They're 25th in three-point percentage, but they're just middle to above average for the most part in offense. However, defense is struggling pretty bad. I'll give you a few points here, Josh, and then we can discuss. They're 7th in points allowed per game with 114. They're 9th in defensive rebounding allowed per game, 6th in three-pointers allowed. They're tied for second to last in blocks per game, so they're not defending the ball very well. They're third worst in defensive rating. That, to me, is the most eye-opening. Defensive rating is honestly one of the most – defense and offense is one of the most influential stats in terms of how you evaluate a team. And they're third worst. And then lastly, to me, they are second highest in total points allowed with 3,200, just behind the Nets. I had in quotation marks, LOL, just behind the Nets. Thoughts?
I think if we're the ones responsible for hitting the panic button to help, we failed. So we probably should have hit the panic button, I don't know, last week when we brought this up. But to be honest, as I was looking things over, things actually aren't as bad as they were last week. The Mavericks have won 4 out of their last 5. So there's the silver lining. It's the best they've done the entire season in these past few weeks. The one loss came by 3 points to Portland. They're hopefully getting a chance to turn things around. The first thing I look at when looking at the fact they're struggling is when they're struggling defensively, you've got to look to Kristaps Porzingis, who's supposed to be the best defender on their team. He's supposed to be the big presence inside. Like we've mentioned before, they are trying to kind of manage his minutes a bit because they don't want him to get hurt again, so they're not playing him crazy amounts. But you've got to think that maybe the strategy wasn't the best to have your only defensive hope to be from one player. Because as I think about it, there aren't a whole lot of guys that I look at in Dallas that I think are remarkable defenders. There's some amazing scorers. But, I don't know what they're supposed to do from a defensive side of the ball.
One that comes to mind that I think is struggling heavily, and I think he's one of the biggest reasons they're not playing super well, is Josh Richardson. 4 seasons in Miami, averages, obviously has that one most recognizable season of 16 points per game. But outside of that, he's a 12.5 per game average guy, and he's a guy that, you want to be able to step up and play in crunch time. And quite frankly, I wouldn't trust him in crunch time right now if I was the Mavericks. And they obviously they they're playing Dorian Finney-Smith more, and they're doing more of that style lineup versus with Josh Richardson. But I think at the end of the day, they're going to need, like you said, we should have hit the panic button. Honestly, we should have hit 2 weeks ago. We mentioned it multiple times. We thought they'd get it back on track. You've got to capitalize on a guy like Luka. We also, ironically enough, I'm going to call it the 2 Pointers podcast curse, the TPP curse, where we talk about a team and we say we're panicking, but yet we're getting here on a Monday afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, and they win 4 out of the last 5. They're looking better. They're looking up.
Is it a curse? That sounds more like we're helping them out there because we just can't be right. So.
Yeah, that's true. So whatever you want to call it, the TPP curse, the TPP help, I don't know. But regardless, the reason I bring that up is because regardless of the 4 out of 5 here, they don't pass my eye test. And I look, 50% of my NBA opinion is eye test. They truly don't look like the same team. They look like a team with a guy like Luka where they're just having to rely on him so heavily. I didn't think about that. I didn't think when I looked at MVP odds and we discussed them, we're like, okay, Luka's the favorite, obviously. But did we not think to look at the roster where Porzingis is going to be gone 4 to 6 weeks? And then, quite frankly, I don't trust a guy after that. Tim Hardaway Jr., an expiring contract, he's going to be moved if they do anything major. We'll discuss that in a few moments. But he's averaging 16 points per game. Like I said, Josh Richardson's down to 12.5. Porzingis is averaging 20. There's not a guy averaging over 10 rebounds per game on that team. And that's truly where I think it kind of stems from, because if you don't have a guy that you can truly rely on other than Luka, they're not looking good for me. If I'm a team in the West and the Mavericks somehow get in, as long as you have a stout defensive player, if you have a Paul George, if you have a Kawhi, you have a guy like that, I want to play the Mavericks in the playoffs unless they make some major move that really changes my mind.
You know who they remind me of as I'm thinking about it? They remind me of the past 3 or 4 years of Damian Lillard in Portland. You've got one absolute star player doing his best to carry a thoroughly mediocre basketball team to the playoffs. I think eventually Dallas is going to make the playoffs, whether it be winning 2 games in crunch time and whatever this play-in tournament is at the end of the season, or if it's getting it as an 8th seed. Luka Doncic, I think, is good enough that they're going to make the playoffs. But I thought that they were going to, play well in the playoffs. And I don't see that happening now. I see, well, especially with there are teams in the Western Conference who have taken massive step forwards, Utah Jazz, that are showing that they're much bigger contenders. Trevor's losing and laughing because he thought the Jazz would suck. But, and I was right, so I'm going to keep throwing that, one of my few right opinions. I lost my train of thought. They're in a tough situation now in Dallas, and without making some change to the roster, like Trevor said, I don't see a player that's going to help fix things there. If Kristaps Porzingis and Dwight Powell aren't providing the big man presence in the paint, which from a defensive and a rebounding perspective, I think it's a little naive that we thought that would be enough in the first place. I don't see what they're going to go forward with here.
I'll tell you what they're missing. They're missing confidence in a couple of key areas. We were already discussing them in a slight amount here, but Porzingis just lacks that same just confidence of that unicorn player that we all as NBA fans fell in love with a few years ago. He's obviously injuries are going to do that to somebody like him. I get it. 7'3", you look at guys like that after an injury, or 2 or 3 or 4, or just consistently not able to get healthy. Track record's not great. But I say that, and he also was jacking up threes from the logo and hitting them. So the other day, right? So, and that win against the Pelicans, he had 36. He looked really good, but it's so inconsistent. You just can't. You get into a playoff series, you got to win 4 games. It's not going to get it done. I think the other guy they missed, and I wanted to bring this up at the end here, since we mentioned defense a little bit, and we'll get more into defense later, probably with the Mavericks on our second segment. But they are missing Seth Curry. They're missing the 3-point shooting that he really truly brought. And when you give up a guy like Seth to get a guy like Josh Richardson, you want Josh Richardson to contribute. You want a guy that can get it done. Like I said, going into the season, looking at the roster, we really did overlook this team in terms of, and this is the second point I want to follow up after what you said, at least the Blazers had some guys around Lillard that I liked, I trusted, that I knew could get a rebound, that I knew could hit a shot. Quite frankly, this team's pretty bad, like bad all around. They got Luka, they've got an inconsistent Porzingis, and they've got a bunch of dudes that, quite frankly, could be in the G League for all I cared. There's a couple here and there, don't get me wrong, but like I'm not trusting Maxi Kleber and Dwight Powell in a playoff series. I'm sorry. Put Luka at the 5. Screw it. 5 out. Put Luka at the 5. Have Jalen Brunson bring the ball up. That's what they got to do at this point. Luka's the only guy that consistently can average, what is it here, 8.6 rebounds a game. He's averaging more rebounds than their center, Kristaps Porzingis. He's averaging 8.2. This team is a problem.
Oh man.
Like I said, if I'm the Clippers, I want them to make it this play-in tournament and then get the 6, 7, 8. Doesn't matter. You want to play a team like that. Denver's probably salivating thinking they can play Dallas in the first round. Are you kidding me? Good Lord, this team's bad. You have to trust a guy like Luka. You really do, but not with the supporting cast looking like this.
Yeah, I think we were probably naive when we were going through these preseason predictions and thinking like, oh, they finished in 7th place. That last year, that was weird. But, they'll advance as Luka develops more. The issue is Luka hasn't been quite as good as he was last year, which is fair because he was playing, well, better than most guys in the NBA for most of last season. And it would make sense that a 20, 21-year-old basketball player would slightly regress after a standout year like that. But we somehow thought that Luka was going to make a massive jump forward and just pull the Mavericks with him up the standings when all these teams in the West were getting better.
To say that, by the way, Luka's, you say that, and I agree with you. He is not playing the same level, right? But you've got these windows with a guy like him at that age. You say that, and he's also probably either going to be the all-star starter or like in the West, or just that next guy out because of Curry and Lillard. He's averaging 29 a game. Like he's taking a step back, right? Like it's crazy to think, but yeah, you can't miss an opportunity with a guy like him. And right now, and they are, to me, you always hear guys like, you always hear these NBA historians or these NBA guys that just do this for a living every single day and they love it. And you always hear these teams are one move away. I think they're more than one move away. I think they're a year away. I really do. I think they need to retool. They got a couple of guys, though, to be cleared, like Josh Green, Tyrell Terry, like 2 guys that I think looked really good like a couple weeks ago for them, like here and there, hit and miss. Guys that I really liked in high school and in their pre-NBA days, but it's just not going to get it done. You don't need 17 guards. You've got a guard you can rely on. You need one guard to bring up the ball. And you need a guy that can you need a guy that Luka can dish to. You need a guy that can help Luka on the defensive end. They're a move away from me, and I think if they don't get it together after this move, because we're, by the way, recording this on February 16th, we're almost 33% of the way done with the season. If not, we just hit the 33% mark because this is the earliest that the All-Star voting will be concluded. There will be 37% of the NBA games played when the All-Star voting is concluded. We're getting there very quickly, and like I said, that's why we said even a week ago, panic. We're hitting the panic button.
One thing I do want to push back on a little bit is the idea of like missing this window with Luka Doncic. Because we got to be clear, not only is it just his 3rd year in the NBA, which I think that we've gotten these shortened attention spans that we expect these guys to come in and be amazing and elevate a team to winning titles so quickly. At 20 or 21 years old, Luka Doncic is probably not going to reach his prime, be the best possible player he's going to be for another 6 or 7 years. There's a lot of time. To put it in comparison, I was trying to think of the idea of winning a title and how long it takes to build a team around an exceptional player. The Chicago Bulls drafted Michael Jordan in 1984. They won their first title in 1991. It took 7
Michael
years.
Jordan.
I'm not comparing the players. I'm just making a point that with the greatest player ever, it took 7 years to build that title team. This window isn't as short as we like to think it is.
No, modern medicine aside, injury volatility is the only thing that scares the crap out of me. And when you have a guy like Luka, yes, it took Jordan that long, and the fact that Jordan didn't get anything major injury-wise between in that 7-year time span, the way they were beat up back then. Obviously, Luka's got everything on his side in terms of just how healthy people are now on average in terms of major injury recovery, especially. But you never want anything like that to happen to a guy like that. But you just can't. You got to capitalize if you can as often as you can and as soon as you can, because of how good he truly is. We knew he was good. They traded up for him, everything or they traded for him, everything. Like they've done everything right up until this point. Continue to build off of that, because in this modern player empowerment era, you don't want him to be in 3 or 4 years to be the guy like peace out. Like you just want to, as a Mavericks fan, you've had great players, you've had 2 great point guards that, quite frankly, like it took one of them being at the end of their career with a Dirk to win one, Jason Kidd. But you want a guy like that for a long time, and to help him feel that way, you've got to help him win.
I agree. From an injury perspective, I'm not concerned about Luka Doncic really at all. He doesn't have any kind of extensive injury history. And what's more, his game is not super physical. He spends a lot of his times rolling over a pick and roll screen. He succeeds off of the fact that he's a dead-eye shooter from outside. He goes in, hits floaters. He plays a non-physical European game that is not super reliant on his athleticism. It's not a Derrick Rose who relies on heavy penetration steps that put pressure on his knees going into the paint. We're talking about a guy that, I mean, a knee or a foot injury, while wouldn't be very good, his game's not super demanding on the body like a lot of other athletic games that some guys have are. I think he could continue to succeed really for a long time in the NBA.
To your point, he is getting in better shape each and every year. I agree with you in the sense that, like, you're probably not going to worry about anything major, barring anything freak. But as he gets healthier each year, as he gets better into playing shape, he was one of the guys. Just my final point here to finish up what you were saying is he was one of the guys even that was very public about how he was surprised the season was starting up that soon. He wasn't prepared for that, and it just, you could that the first couple of weeks of the season. You could tell. Granted, he's averaging 29, but you can tell his body's not ready yet. He'll continue to play himself into playoff shape, similar to how Shaq did in the past, where you just come in and you take it easy, you play yourself into that shape, and you're ready to go. Barring if they even make the playoffs.
Well, like I said, I think at least we're going to be looking at Dallas in a 9 or 10 spot, and they'll have that pressure situation to play in at the end of it, which is kind of one of those situations where we saw with Portland last year that a star player that can kind of put his team on his back for one game can kind of play in there. Moving forward, it was surprising news yesterday, Monday the 15th, that the Cleveland Cavaliers announced that they're going to stop playing Andre Drummond, and they're going to be pursuing trade offers for him around the league, and they won't be playing him for the foreseeable future as they try to transition to Jared Allen as the new focal point of their franchise, which I don't think is a bad decision. I mean, they're going young Jared Allen to add with Colin Sexton and Darius Garland. He's roughly the same age as those players, where Andre Drummond has been in the league a good 5 or 6 years longer and is a bit older. It makes sense from a building a franchise standpoint, but it still kind of came as a surprise to everyone that Drummond was placed on the trade block. So where does Andre Drummond potentially, the argument can be made, the best rebounder in the NBA today, where is he going to go?
To your point, I was going to cut you off there and say that, I agree with you there. But to your point, as they should on Jared Allen, they should totally make that transition. For you, and we can bounce off each other, and I can go my 2 first, however you want to do it. But I'll give you my first one. To no one's surprise, or to Josh's own, and I can tell by the smirk that's developing on his face, the Cody Zeller era can come to a close. And I'm going to give you my point, and then we can discuss. They look really good, Charlotte does. I'm just going to say that. Obviously, we as having you on here constantly talk about the Hornets more than any other media outlet ever. But I truly do enjoy watching them. I look forward to turning on League Pass and watching the Hornets every night. And I knew I was going to, obviously having a guy like Lamelo, which we'll discuss later. But they look really good some nights, and they could truly get hot in the second half of the year. I really do. But, however, with this 3-guard lineup they've got going on, you can't – I don't think that's sustainable. We can debate that if you want, but you got to have versatility in the lineup. James Borrego's really good at having lineup versatility from his time, even when he was in Orlando, and even his early time in Charlotte. Like, he's been able to utilize lineups really well. And then, surprise, they get a guy like Gordon Hayward, and you can do everything you want with a guy like him at 3 or 4, right, with a 3-guard lineup. But PJ Washington is having to play elevated minutes at center, and I don't think that's sustainable long term to be successful, especially if you're trying to beat a team in either the playoffs or play in tournament. I really hope it doesn't get to that for them. I really do hope they can finish in that 6th spot. As a small market guy, and I'll summarize my point, and we can just, as a small market NBA guy, I know how hard it is, or you know how specifically hard it is for small teams to get big dollar, big name free agents. He would take up a majority of the team's cap this offseason coming up, assuming he re-signs there. I think it's a great fit for how little Charlotte may have to give up, and we can debate that in just a moment. I've got a couple packages, or really, I think there was only one that made sense cap-wise, but the Cavs really gave up nothing to get him. Y'all may be able to do the same. What are your thoughts as a fan and as a media person as well?
There are 2 avenues I can take in discussing this. There's a really looking at all of the different variables that Charlotte's going to have to look at going into this side, and then there's just a quick reactions. Personally, when I saw that Drummond was getting traded, my initial thoughts were now is the time for Charlotte to try to make a move on a big trade target, and Trevor's laughing. First of all, Drummond to Charlotte has been a rumored move for 3 or 4 years, going back to when Andre was in Detroit before going to Cleveland. When he was getting traded somewhere, going to Charlotte for some reason has always been there. And to me, it didn't make sense for a long time because we were, frankly, a terrible basketball team that wasn't going to get anywhere. And like adding an Andre Drummond who couldn't score when we had an offense problem wasn't going to help very much. Now we don't have an offense problem. We very much have a big man problem. When you look at the roster and the heights of players that get significant minutes, if you could look just straight down the roster, this isn't true, but if you look just at players that get significant minutes, you have Cody Zeller at 7 feet, and you got Bismack Biyombo at 6'8". It's just players. That's why PJ Washington, who is a swing 4, it's not really even that true power forward, is playing minutes at center, is causing issues. But here's where it gets complicated. So you mentioned like Andre Drummond's a free agent going into next season. Realistically, Charlotte has the 2 options. The one, invest in him for 1 year, which doesn't make a lot of sense because they're not, while they may make the playoffs, they're not any kind of long-term contender this year. Or invest in him in multiple years. But if they invest in him for years going down the line, they can really only re-sign that one free agent. The problem is Devontae Graham is also a free agent this coming off season and who is expected to take up a good number of that Hornets cap space. Devontae Graham's not a spot really to be traded to Cleveland, given that they already have Darius Garland and Colin Sexton and probably aren't interested in a guard that's worse than them playing a combo guard spot.
I have your solution.
Yep. Go.
Who says no? Charlotte calls. Ring, 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 ring. Hello, whoever the heck's on the other line for Cleveland. I don't know any of the GMs for these garbage teams anymore. I used to be able to keep up. Hey, this is whoever in Charlotte. I'll give you Cody Zeller, Malik Monk, and Bismack Biyombo. You give us Drummond in a second. Let's call it into the league. Who says no?
So you said that the Hornets' problem was PJ Washington playing significant minutes. And your solution is
at the center position.
Yes,
I don't know if I said that.
Playing significant minutes at the center position. So your solution is to trade 2 centers that the Hornets have on roster for 1 center, where PJ Washington would still play significant center minutes because I don't think Drummond's playing 48 minutes a game.
Okay, so to clarify then,
sorry to poke holes in that. To
discuss then. No, so look, I had that written down as what could go wrong, right? So
yeah.
What could go wrong here is there's no other money that makes sense to work I even tried to throw both the Martin twins together and say, hey, two twins that like to play together, here's $3 million combined. Like there's nothing else that makes sense because of Monk's middle ground, that $5 to $8 million contract that makes sense. I tried everything. The NBA trade machine, I put it all together. And so I agree with you. I really do think that as somebody who's not even a fan of them, I want to see him succeed this year. And I think you could solve that issue by signing him. And then obviously you have a veteran exception to help get you a player that can help you next year. They're not going to be a buyout team destination, obviously, when it comes to try to push for a title next year or whatever, right? But they could solve both issues at one, the double-edged sword, right? So I think if I'm understanding you right, try to sign him in the offseason, and if not, what happens, right? Am I understanding that right?
My thought process is so if you make the trade for Drummond, no matter what it takes to get the money to work, I know you're right, to trade for Andre Drummond from Charlotte, Cody Zeller and Malik Monk have to go to Cleveland, without a doubt. For it to make sense from a tactical standpoint, Charlotte would at minimum need to keep a Bismack Biyombo because they've shown that they're not ready to give playing time to Vernon Carey Jr. or Nick Richards yet, because they're still a year away. Yeah. They're spending most of their time in Greensboro becoming better at pro basketball. Yeah. Shout out to the Swarm that's done a great job at developing players. While it's great in theory, it's really the Hornets' bad cap situation is going to make this pretty hard.
Big picture is Devontae Graham, because of money reasons, and they're both Devontae Graham and Andre Drummond, both free agents. Big picture, from understanding the total point of this conversation, is worrying about Devontae Graham when you have a guy like Rozier under contract for a while. You've got a guy you can trust in Lamelo.
You've got a guy like Rozier under contract for one more year after Graham. Rozier is on his second year of a 3-year deal.
So does Rozier go in this?
That's where it's hard because he and Graham. So I've had the conversation with a lot of people recently. It's obvious that most likely going forward, Charlotte's going to keep one of Rozier or Graham. It's not going to be both.
Right.
They're about the same age. Rozier's 1 year older. Rozier's playing significantly better this year. Last year, Graham looked better.
Right.
So we don't know who is better.
I can tell you who is better.
Right now, we think Rozier's better. And that
I think Rozier's better, period.
Yeah.
Graham was barely a G League player 2 years ago, right? So I think big picture here, I guess that the piece. Logistically, you do have to. I really do think, as a fan for you, as well as just for this organization, I think this is truly a fork in the road, and we may see where this road goes by March. I really do think I wouldn't be shocked if nothing happens, but I'm going to be less shocked if something happens, if that makes sense. I'm going to be hoping that something happens as somebody who wants his team to succeed. That's not a fan, quite frankly.
I think to make the trade work money-wise, there would need to be a third team. It's one of those things that makes me wish that Nick Batum was still under contract to trade that whole deal.
No.
Because Nick Batum's money would come pretty close to matching Drummond's. Just throw some picks in there.
Yeah, but the fact that okay, look, before we move on to my second team, because you've still got two teams as well. And
I got one now.
Okay, all right, that's what I thought. We said we were going to wait and see each other's live reaction. But before we get to our second and third team, if you're saying that, and that, I want to divulge that pick point, because you mentioned okay, here, if you had Batum, you had some picks, you can get a guy like Drummond that you said it yourself, 5 straight years of top rebounder.
Mm-hmm.
Like a guy like that, a great defender, you can do this without giving up a single pick, first or second. That's huge to me. As somebody who is a fan of the biggest market team in the league, who had to trade for a guy like Anthony Davis to get, to pick its push like that.
Had to.
For a small market team, had to. Look, whatever, right? I'm not opening up that can of worms. But regardless, for a team look, I'm from North Carolina. This team has always been cool to me. I hate that I wasn't a fan, but then again, I see your misery sometimes, and I feel like I made the right decision. But you have a guy that you can get without giving up a single bit of your future, barring a crossroads with 3 point guards that you obviously, it doesn't really matter who the second one is. You have LaMelo Ball, who we'll discuss very shortly. Any
Well,
other thoughts on Charlotte?
break it down. What the tactical decision is, the way you set it up, make money work. You're trading away Cody Zeller and Bismack Biyombo. And from a tactical standpoint, I'm not certain that it makes the team a lot better because then you just go back to Drummond plays starting minutes and then PJ Washington is playing the backup center minutes and you're right back where you were to begin with.
Regardless, I hope something happens. Look, it's going to be fun. Whether if he doesn't get traded to Charlotte, we're going to be like, okay, this team could really. This is it. This is the team they want to roll with moving forward for the most part, barring anything crazy in the offseason. Devontae Graham gets more money, wherever, right? Then you look back and go, what if, right? But regardless, they're going to be a fun team. I still think my point still stands that I hope that they at least get the play-in tournament. I want them to. I think they can at least get to that 7-8 spot. I can do my second one, or you can go to your second one and see if we have the same.
You go ahead and hit your second one and see if
we only have two this segment. I am going to then one. This is the one to me that basketball-wise, as a fan, I am a basketball fan till through and through, and this one makes the most sense for the excitement of the league. We just talked about them, the struggling that they need a rebounder, they need a defender. And guess who solves that issue? The Dallas Mavericks. Are we talking about two teams or are we talking about three? Do you have a third one? Okay, you do have a third one. I think.
Yeah, I have a third team.
Awesome. Let's do the Mavericks real fast because we've already been on them. I just want to run through a few things that I found out in separate points of research, by the way. I'm like, oh, wait, the Mavericks are a really good destination for Drummond. And I found a few things that actually would match up to what I said prior. Regardless of what the trade package looks like, a couple of them I'll just run through quick because we don't have to debate them. They're the only two that make sense long-term or short-term, really, for that matter. James Johnson, $17 million expiring. They did sign a guy like James Johnson to quote-unquote defend and be the bodyguard for Luka. Otherwise, he's been a horrible player on the court for them. James Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Trey Burke, or James Johnson, Dwight Powell, and a first-round pick for 2 seconds. Something like that long-term makes the most sense and makes the money fit regardless. The best player, you win this trade no matter what, and that's my last point here, is that no matter how it shook out with the packages, Drummond is a 7-win improvement based on PER with the ESPN trade machine. He helps them in the two categories we talked about before, capitalize on Luka, get a guy like Drummond. Porzingis, obviously, unfortunately, is a center, and some of his most impactful minutes are played at center, but he's not rebounding the ball and defending. Drummond will. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think if you're Dallas, you have to be on the phone with Cleveland. Like, your issues are rim defense and rebounding. Guess who's great at rim defense and rebounding? Andre Drummond. And yeah, like the guys you're mentioning, like it's stuff to make salary match. James Johnson is a guy who's being way overpaid, frankly, for what he's doing. And it's an easy send. It's kind of the whole Nick Batum thing I'm mentioning. Like if you just had your dead weight, dead cap, ship it out for matching, since Cleveland doesn't have a ton of leverage because they've said they're not going to use this guy anymore, and they're making him look like they're lowering his value by doing that. Yeah, I think if you're Dallas, you got to do it. You got to make the move for it because you're a team that everyone thought would be contending and isn't.
No more Dallas Mavericks talk the rest of this podcast. I'm putting stuff on it.
So third one. So cast your mind back to when we're thinking about a team in the offseason that got significantly worse.
Am I going to fall over out of my chair when you say this team? Is this going to be like some left field team?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I'm holding on. Here we go.
One offseason team that's currently struggling because for the most part, they lost 2 big men in the offseason who decided to move to a warmer climate in sunny LA, or the Toronto Raptors. They lost Ibaka and Gasol in the offseason and are, for the most part, struggling because they lost Ibaka and Gasol in the offseason. How do you fix that problem? Get a 7-foot rim defender and rebounder like Andre Drummond and bring him up to Toronto. I just don't see why they wouldn't do it. I haven't looked at enough to see where the money would be made to work, but you're looking at a team that in theory should be able to contend. They're starting to play better. That's based a lot around defense, which lends itself to a player like Andre Drummond, who's more centered from a defensive perspective of the basketball game than to look from an offensive perspective. I think he'd fit well into the team. It's not that different it's not that different of a team culture-wise than where he's been before. In Detroit and Cleveland, I don't think Toronto's that big of a different step. And he would have an opportunity to be a guy that can essentially grab offensive rebounds and kick it back out to Lowry and Van Vliet.
I'm going to push back slightly.
Okay.
I think it's because it calls for it as well as I agree with you. I saw this as well doing my NBA mad scientist trade machine stuff. So I'm going to give you what I found. They're, first of all, the only team to have expressed interest in Drummond so far, to be clear. They're the only team on record we want to try to get Drummond. Unfortunately, however, they lack matching salary. And that's the biggest. I know a lot of teams do. He's paid $27 million, right? But assuming their young trio of Van Vliet, Siakam, and Anunoby are untouchable, is it really worth? And by the way, their trade package would not be deemed legal until March 3rd for something like Baines. You corrected me on his name last couple of pods. Boucher, Bobby Boucher, whatever his name is, Chris Boucher. He's been really good. That guy, Aaron Baines. Thank you. That guy, Aaron Baines and Norman Powell. I just don't see a fit that makes sense without giving up serious value that's present.
Yeah, it's always the issue of it's going to be hard kind of thing. It's the same reason I have reservations about Charlotte when you can do it, but will it make the team better? Some. How much? How much are you willing to put on a guy like Drummond who's not always an offensive asset? He's improved massively in years recent, but he hasn't always been.
To be clear, I think they're the front runner, and I'll tell you the only reason why. Money aside, somebody will make it work, and the one man I think that can make it work is the guy that made a Kawhi Leonard trade work and turned it into a title, Mr. Masai Ujiri.
Yep.
That's the one person right now that is just this wild card. And in the past, he's been a true out of nowhere, holy crap, Kawhi Leonard's a Toronto Raptor wild card, right? Andre Drummond is not Kawhi Leonard. Let's just make that completely clear.
Let's also be clear, it's out of nowhere because everybody tends to forget about small market teams.
Right. And even beside that, they had a lot of good pieces and they gave up the least impactful ones, apparently, or obviously, as we saw. But my other thing, too, is they're a team that we, quite frankly, both of us had them in the playoffs. If I remember correctly, I had them at 5 or 6. You had them at like 4 or 6 or 4 or 5, somewhere in that same range. So we had them as a team that would be good. Siakam, I love Siakam. But he needs a guy to play alongside him that can help take some of that defensive pressure away. Bobby Boucher, Chris Boucher, has been a offensive player for the most part. And Aaron Baines is having to play basically 35 minutes a game type, impact role for Toronto. And I just think that it makes sense. It could be something that you look back on and go, why'd they give up this guy? Because he's 28 years old and he's a big man that got hurt 3 games into the next season. Like, we could be looking back going, that was an awful idea. But he's also the free agent piece. We mentioned that already. He's a impending or ensuing free agent after this season. And I think that makes this all the more worthwhile for teams like Toronto, who, quite frankly, are just struggling in general. They just aren't playing well. COVID aside, injuries aside, they need this next push. And I think Drummond is the case to get them back into that playoff hunt.
Yeah, I'm confused on whether or not you like the idea of Drummond to Toronto or not, because you kind of started on the negative and went to the positive. But
I was giving myself devil's advocate. I like the move from a basketball standpoint because they're a team that needs to compete in an East that's honestly, as of the Tuesday, February 16th, basically 3 teams. And I think they can be that 4th team to kind of surprise. Here we are. We got Andre Drummond. And now looking forward here, I'll give you I really do think this is actually a good idea. I'm almost talking to myself into this live, is he'll match up well against Giannis. He'll match up well against Embiid. He'll match up well against, that's pretty much it in the East. So he'll play those teams really well. And I'm definitely forgetting who's the 3rd best team in the East right now. I'm totally forgetting somebody. Brooklyn, thank you. I'm forgetting a team with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden. He won't help that much, but in that case, but they also can't stop anybody. So that, I think they'd outscore them no matter what. But yeah, I'm honestly, I talked myself into it. Toronto's the team that's the front runner. I think obviously they are the only team that's made it public that they wanted. Masai Ujiri could have done if it gets done.
All right, that's enough Drummond trade talk because we're probably going a bit long. No, it's not
Oh.
enough Drummond trade talk. Trevor's coming back.
No, it's actually no. It's what I told you before. I do want to just make a point about another big man that formerly, or that a big man that has something to do with Detroit is some Blake Griffin stuff that came up similarly. I just wanted to at least say this as somebody who's a huge fan of Blake, Lob City, all that stuff. Like Blake was so much fun to watch, right? But I do want to just say how sad it is where we are with Blake Griffin. I do want to at least make this point because I saw it and I thought it was interesting. For him, for Blake, it's less about the trade rumors and it's more about ultimately will something happen to him outside of being traded? Like, will anything happen to him? Will he just be stuck in Detroit the rest of the year and just be this lifeless, limpless, just not able to get around and not be the same person? And I'll tell you why I say that. Did you know? I have a fun fact for you. According to the Ringer's Zach Cram the other day, he wrote an awesome piece about Blake, and I found out something that I thought was really crazy. Did you know that you and I and most of the listeners, Josh, have the same amount of dunks as Blake Griffin this season? That number would be 0.
Yeah.
He's played most of the season. He's not been good. He's been this. It's to a point where I think he's just 1-2 injury too far. I wanted to make the point of saying this on record. I hope something happens to him. I truly want him to go to a contender. I think he can be impactful for a team like Boston, for a team like maybe Indiana, something. It's sad to see, but I do want to just make that point about he hasn't even attempted a dunk this year.
Do you remember that point I made about Luka Doncic when we were talking about Luka, that players who rely on freak athleticism for the base of their games have longevity issues in the NBA? Blake Griffin's if you want to put definition of uses freak athleticism to get ahead in the NBA, it's Blake Griffin. And he's an absolute monster for a time, but he's not 23-year-old Blake anymore.
All I can say is I hope Zion, a guy like him, similar athleticism, I hope Zion can hold up long term. Voting will already be decided by the time this pod's over. It's tonight at 11:59. But hashtag vote Zion into the All-Star game. We just want to see a fun All-Star game if they're going to happen.
So, last big conversation to have today. Trevor phrased at the top of the podcast is Lamelo Ball the best 19-year-old we've ever seen? That's not how I'm going to introduce this segment. I'm going to introduce it as Lamelo Ball is the best 19-year-old we've ever seen in the NBA. Yes. You're not even going to let me get through the point. Okay. So, currently, under wins above replacement, to look at what the value of a player for wins to his team is, Lamelo Ball is on pace to have the highest wins above replacement for any 19-year-old rookie in NBA history, finishing just ahead of LeBron James.
Say that stat one more time for me, just so I make sure.
Lamelo Ball is currently on pace to have the highest wins above replacement for any 19-year-old rookie in NBA history. Currently, that record is held by LeBron James. Lamelo Ball is currently projected to pass LeBron James and have that mark. So statistically, at this moment, he is having the most impactful rookie season for a teenager ever.
And he was coming off the bench 8 games ago.
Yes.
Fired
and it's only not because people started getting hurt. Don't fire Borrego.
I was like, did you hear that? Like, I definitely think you heard that.
I didn't hear it at first.
What? Okay, so then I guess before I even get into my, at least argument for this, why wasn't he starting? We said that 8 games ago. Sorry, 12 games ago. It shouldn't take guys getting hurt for somebody like him to play. I'm sorry, rotational fit aside, if you just want to put the best 5 players on the court, he's starting. And oh my God. Oh, he's starting point guard. I don't get it. I agree with you that he's really good. I'm going to give you a few guys really fast, and we can debate this. I'm going to give you 6 guys or 8 total, but 6 that are, I think, Hall of Famers, no doubt, that could possibly. Now, granted, hindsight's 2020. We don't have a full sample size on Lamelo yet. I get it, but a few guys who have had really good 19-year-old seasons in the NBA: Andrew Bynum, Kyrie Irving, Chris Bosh, Dwight Howard, Anthony Davis. You already mentioned LeBron James, Andre Drummond, and Kobe Bryant. To me, Kobe Bryant's the best 19-year-old player we've ever seen because he was an all-star. He helped lead them to the second round of the playoffs. He looked really good. Obviously, I'm biased. I get it. There's going to be 2 bias points in this 19-year-old debate. But I don't think it's this like he's running away with it. Now, granted, I can't argue the WAR stat. I really can't. It shows that they are helping the team win, and it backs up everything I said about how this team's good. But we've had some darn good players that are 19 years old and lit it up.
If I show you how much he's leading on the WAR stat, it's going to make you feel worse.
Hit me with it.
Currently, Lamelo Ball is on pace for a WAR or WARP as they read it in the NBA, but it still means wins above replacement of 9.1. LeBron James currently holds the record where in his rookie season, LeBron James and Dwight Howard are tied for the record. In their rookie seasons, they had a wins above replacement of 7.7. So LaMelo Ball is currently projecting 1.4. He's not edging them out. And here's what's crazy about it to get back to your not starting point. LaMelo at the beginning of the season struggled. He turned the ball over a lot. He didn't shoot well. He has gotten better. He's gotten more efficient, started shooting better, and is playing better. So not only is this stat that I'm giving you him being on pace, counting in the fact that he is getting exponentially better as the season is going along. It's possible that he may do better than what we're currently projecting he will do. It's coming to the point where the weaknesses that we thought were there for him, turning the ball over too much, which he still does a little too much, but not significantly more than any other 19-year-old. And we thought he was going to shoot poorly from three. In the National Basketball League last year, he shot 25% from three. In the NBA this year, he's shooting 39%. This is a guy that they said was not good at shooting. He's shooting 39% from three, and that is just like a third or fourth option of his game.
Not that this surprises me, but just fun fact, as of an hour ago on ESPN, he's the number one jersey sale in Australia at this moment. Obviously, he played there, 30 games, whatever, right? But right. But hopefully, All-Star Ben Simmons, right? But no, LaMelo is really good, man. We joked to each other all week about this. I knew this topic was coming. I even sent you a couple of tweets from NBA Twitter about Carmelo Anthony's the best and the only Melo.
Not anymore.
In terms of big game, and I'm gonna ride on that train to the end. But Melo's the Melo. Carmelo Anthony is the Melo for me. But no, he's really good. A couple of key stats that I do want to mention just in defense for with you as well. Just look, I truly don't think this 19-year-old thing is a quote unquote like we're gonna have a debate or an answer. It's just like the GOAT conversation. You're gonna debate the GOAT till we're all dead. Like it's just we can't go that's the guy, right? Even in football, like you can say Brady's the best, whatever, right? You can say Gretzky's the best. You can say like the GOAT's always going to be a debate. There's always going to be somebody who says it's someone else, right? Heck, there might be somebody out there that says it's Kyrie Irving that had the best 19-year-old season. He was really good, right, coming out of Duke. But no, regardless, I think it's between Kobe, Anthony Davis, LeBron, and LaMelo. But one stat I wanted to bring up that I did think I was really keen on that I noticed was just he's not averaging very many turnovers as well. So when he does have the ball, he's averaging 2.7 turnovers per game, which is pretty low in terms of average for a point guard,
especially for
caliber. A rookie, right? A rookie who I mentioned before, who has a lot of experience, right? So I think he was really prepared for it. He's really prepared for this stage. But man, he's really good. I told you he's my favorite league pass MVP guy on the East Coast right now. West Coast is De'Aaron Fox, but two really exciting guards. I'm happy for you as a Charlotte Hornets fan. I'm not going to debate it till I was blue in the face. I thought about it when I was doing these notes. I'm like, oh, it's LeBron. Oh, it's Kobe.
Yeah.
But to be clear, Kobe did lead the Lakers or help lead the Lakers to a second-round playoff and lost to the Utah Jazz. So, we've had some great 19-year-olds. This league is so awesome in terms of what this draft class is.
And to be clear, Kobe Bryant went to a better Lakers team than LaMelo Ball went to a Hornets team. Let's be fair.
100%.
On that side of that, yeah.
Andrew Bynum went to a winner. Kyrie did not at the time. That Cleveland team was terrible. Chris Bosh went to a Toronto team that was declining with Jalen Rose.
That's why I like to compare. Like you look at the comparisons to LeBron James and Dwight Howard. They didn't go to good franchises in Cleveland or Orlando at the time.
Yep, Dwight's a good comparison. I do like the Dwight one. He was so dominant, and basically came out of high school. Like he came out of high school, of course, and LaMelo professional experience here and there aside. Like he was basically a high school guy turning into a pro. But yeah, they both had similar pass in that room. And then ironically enough, Andre Drummond. He had a really good rookie year, even still playing beside Greg Monroe at the time, which they thought he was going to be their quintessential all-star, right? But Drummond ended up being that guy. Man, what a fun draft class that we were debating. Thank goodness we defended it very publicly that this isn't a horrible draft class, and he's going to end up being, I think, the best out of the top three. I was a Wiseman guy, ride or die. I was a Wiseman guy, ride or die, but LaMelo is going to be able to prove it for a lot longer. And I'll end with this. He proved me already wrong. I knew I was going to eventually have to say this live. He's the best ball brother, and I'll admit it. I'm over it. I'm done. That's my final point.
A debate that everyone finished with about a month and a half ago. Trevor's finally there.
Most people a year ago.
I thought he passed him when Charlotte beat the Pelicans in primetime. Yeah. But yeah, when you talk about from the draftable players, long before, so like people are going to listen and think that I'm going to hype up Lamelo Ball way more because I'm a Hornets fan, and I am, to be perfectly honest. But
you can't even do it seriously. That's the funny part.
You broke me down.
How much of this am I going to cut out? Absolutely nothing, to be clear.
No one's going to understand why I just broke down laughing.
You can tell him. I'm good with
it. Trevor was just miming me, and it took me a while to get it. I said LaMelo Ball was the best player in the draft class by far, long before Charlotte ever picked him. I would definitely be hyping up LaMelo this much. I wouldn't be as overjoyed about it if Charlotte hadn't gotten him, given the place they were in. But I would still be as firm in my point here. LaMelo Ball, easily best player from that draft class. The easiest pick that we had coming out of the draft of who would win Rookie of the Year since Luka Doncic was drafted, where we knew that was a foregone conclusion. It's easy to say. It's a foregone conclusion LaMelo Ball is winning Rookie of the Year. Period.
I think even if he has a major injury and he's out 6 weeks, I still think
he's already won it. It's done.
I'll leave you with this somber point because they are the Charlotte Hornets after all. Oh, what a great alternate reality it would be if Patrick Williams was the third overall pick this year. I love you. I really do.
Do you want me to go through the history of guys the Hornets have passed on or narrowly missed? Because it's a sad history. It's a sad
listeners one. I don't think the listeners want to, if they've been listening as long as we have. We can wrap it up.
Man.
This has been fun. I think it's been my favorite one so far. I hope. We're going to see how long. I love it whenever I'm editing this. All right.
News alert before we wrap up. The NBA is having a dunk contest at halftime of the All-Star game. Kind of weird. I don't know how long that halftime is going to be because usually that dunk contest takes like an hour. So probably not going to be.
You think it'll be 2 guys or 4? You think it'll be 2 or 4?
Kind of suck, wouldn't it?
I mean, to be frank, 2 of the best guys you can, Miles Bridges and whoever the heck else.
It's Miles Bridges versus Derrick Jones Jr. Let's do it.
I'm down. I'm good with it. I like it. 2 versus 4. I think that would make the most sense with time. 2 makes more sense than 4.
I'd like to see it get a full 4 guys, but that's just a different conversation for a different day. We were wrong. There will be a dunk contest of the skills of the like Saturday night comps to bring in. It's the best one. Probably I'm not the best. I'm not the most confident in the whole, okay, let's bring more guys in that definitely aren't guys that made the All-Star game anyway because they never compete the dunk contest. But yeah, so there will be a dunk contest. We'll probably talk about that more as the All-Star break gets closer. But also, everyone,
we'll also be just keeping in mind too, it's getting closer and closer, is March Madness. We are a basketball podcast after all. We will be giving our March Madness pod, which awesomely enough, our first year doing this, we're going to get an extra day because they're doing games a day or two. They're pushing them back further. So Selection Sunday is still Sunday, but games don't play till Wednesday or Thursday, I believe. I believe it's Thursday even. So we've got plenty of time, right? It'll give me time to get it out way before, right, we even have anything to worry about, right? Our opinions will be out there, so there's no debate. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. This has been the 2 Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor.
And I'm Josh. And we will see you soon.